Thank you, Xiaoxi, and hello, everybody. As you know, I'm Moore. Some of you know me. I'm a PhD student here at GSAP and also an arguments instructor this summer. It's an absolute pleasure and honor to introduce TianTian today, who will be presenting about her recent film and exhibition, Into the Island, that opened at the Canadian Centre of Architecture in Montreal this past May. A film that we had a very vibrant discussion about in the preceding session. TianTian is the founding principal of DNA Design and Architecture, an interdisciplinary practice that has been working extensively in the Chinese countryside for over a decade. She received a Bachelor in Architecture from Tsinghua University, where she is now teaching as a professor of practice, as well as a Master's of Architecture in Urban Design from Harvard's Graduate School of Design. Her work can be understood as a strategic intervention both within and against the urban and infrastructural developments that have fundamentally transformed the rural landscape in China over the past few decades. Since the late 20th century, infrastructural systems such as high-speed rail and broadband internet have integrated village communities into a much wider economic network, which at times seem to threaten the quote-unquote authentic or traditional forms of social life that exist in these places. If one of the tendencies of these ever-increasing processes of modernization is to flatten out the regional differences that make each of these villages unique, then TianTian's work offers an alternative methodology that leaves room for the material and cultural practices that define these rural communities that she works with and give them their singular identity. In other words, she does not approach the countryside as a monolithic or undifferentiated territory, but rather seeks to understand the local specificities of these communities in order to arrive at a solution that builds upon the pre-existing or latent condition, a strategy which she has aptly coined architectural acupuncture. Sometimes it takes the form of a loosely held constellation of architectural structures, as in the projects located in the mountain region of Songyang that she worked on before this current project. At other times, as it turns out, a physical building is not required to make a meaningful intervention on a particular site, as in the almost sublime landscape of the mudflats that surround Meiju Island, which we learned about in the film. Translating the idea of architectural acupuncture to the medium of film, Into the Island moves across different scales and brings into view the multivalent forms of life on Meiju Island, from religious festivals and seaweed cultivation to the tourism industry and the mangrove ecosystem. The film overturns many of the problematic strategies of anthropological filmmaking that have all too often been perpetuated in architectural documentaries. Xu does not present herself as a, this thing got louder. Xu does not present herself as a omniscient narrator who looks upon the village from a God's eye point of view, but rather she appears as one actor among many others, constantly conversing and learning from the local inhabitants of the island. Moreover, the film is deeply aware of those invisible factors of the natural and built environment which cannot be recorded through film or photography, like humidity, temperature, wind, and smell. And again, smell is one of those things that is so kind of defining to a place that architects, forget about all too often. Her poetic and granular image of the Meiju Island is further reinforced by the material artifacts displayed in the exhibition, including mangrove shoots, building materials, fishing equipment, and devotional objects, which almost quite literally can be read as a cross-section of all the levels that constitute the social life of the island, from the material base to the ideological superstructure. I must say, as a training architectural historian who's very interested in religion, I very much appreciate TianTian's attention to religious ceremonies and festivals and this thing that she calls intangible inheritance, which is another one of these things that oftentimes gets swept away from a secular modern point of view. The film and exhibition are particularly significant right now at a moment when architects and scholars are trying to rethink the relationship between the natural and the man-made, the urban and the rural, and the material and immaterial. Her work has been selected by the UN Habitat as a case study for inspiring practice on urban and rural linkages. She has also received numerous awards, including the Swiss Architectural Award, the Berliner Kunstpreis, the Marcus Prize, and the Global Award for Sustainable Architecture awarded by UNESCO and the Cité de l'Architecture et du Patrimoine. In 2020, she was appointed an honorary fellow of the Architecture Institute, the American Institute of Architects. Please help me in welcoming Xu TianTian.
Thank you, Mo. Thank you for the introduction, and thanks to Xiaoxi for the invitation. I just realized it's really my first time visiting school GSAP here, but it's really nice to meet everyone, all of you, and also I'm so glad to see some of my Tsinghua alumni, very young students, coming straight from Beijing today. Into the island, maybe we go back to the poster. Into the island, can we start from the poster? Not yet with this PDF. Start with the poster. Can we go back to the poster? Thank you very much. I just want to talk briefly about this Into the Island project and the exhibition. And it's our ongoing project that is under construction, and it was also a process that we have been learning constantly. And I would especially like to thank CCA for working with us from the very beginning of the design process. For them, this exhibition at Montreal wasn't to show the end results of finished buildings, but it's rather to discuss, to understand the process of making architecture, and also the thinking, the philosophy, the theory behind. So it was really and they really joined us even before we started the design process. So it was constant. It was really a continuous meeting, discussion, coming along the design journey. And I would like to thank Francesco and Irene, the curators, flying from Montreal to our small island, major island in South China, in Fujian province. And also the Joshua, the film director, and his team members to follow us on the side, and also just to run through all the villages on this small island for, I think was for like over 2 weeks in total. So you have seen the film, but before we start to go into the island, I want to, maybe we can take a look of our earlier projects in the mountain region first. Slide, please. Thank you. So this is our office, DNA, Design and Architecture. Do I operate from my side? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Basically, it's no name. It's just, we discovered that it's really it's what we have been doing, simply designing and making space and taking architecture as the instrument. Especially after we started to work in the rural region. We started with the collaboration with Songyang County exactly 10 years ago. And that was also the first time that we discovered the rural side of China for myself. To visit the mountain villages, and also to see to discover the heritage and culture, agricultural production, and also to understand that the situation with rural, especially when the young people move to cities, with the past urbanization process, and many of the rural villages were losing population and left with only mostly elder inhabitants. So there was an 8 years collaboration, and we brought this proposal to take architecture as acupunctural strategy to provide solution for this rural issue, to collaborate with the county of Songyang and then also with the different village communities. So Songyang basically it's a agricultural county with 50,000 population in the county urban center, but then 190,000 inhabitants in the small villages, thousands of small villages scattered around. And I won't, now it's full screen. So some of the examples that we've been working with different villages in Songyang. For example, this is the Hakka Indenture Museum that we were able to revive a local masonry building technique along with this indenture museum dedicated to the indenture and Hakka heritage in this Shicang mountain village. And then in another village, Henjiang village, we were able to renovate and also to expand a abandoned camellia oil workshop as for the local production, but also as shared milling house for the local village community. And brown sugar factory is in a flatland, which is to reorganize or actually to establish a villager union as the owners, the shareholders, operate this collective brown sugar factory. So to upgrade the production quality and also the price of their brown sugar product, and which also increase the village revenue. Not only the price of brown sugar rise 4 to 5 times in the past years, but also attract young people returning home to join the production union and also inspire other initiatives by the villagers. Another tofu factory from Caijai village, which is known for the best tofu production in the region. So the tofu factory again is operated by the villager union, but also functioning as the common kitchen and educational, cultural platform to showcase the traditional way of making tofu. And we also work with the local natural material. For example, in this case, Henkeng village, which is known for its bamboo forest, bamboo mountain. So we just used the natural, the live bamboo and to weave into a space, open space in the nature, and which we also see it as a metabolic architecture. And also the a renovation of a abandoned Shimen Bridge becomes a connection for a reunion for the 2 villages across the river, which can also function as a pedestrian walkway. So in the 8 years of collaboration, we've been working, it was actually full-time working with Songyang County, but constantly meeting with the different communities and also different departments from the county government. But there was also a learning process for us to really to rediscover the culture, the agriculture, and also the heritage, the tradition, and how people make a living in this mountain region. So these are the projects that we have been working with and becoming a circulation within this area in the region. And it was also a process I wanted to specifically to mention that this is we don't really see architecture as the building only or the numbers of building, but rather in this case, when you really meet with the social issues in the rural region, architecture and design can become a social strategy to identify the issues and also to provide a solution. And at the end, we wanted to formulate a circulation to revive the local heritage, culture, production, and also to formulate a circulation within this region, which we consider it's a social, cultural, and also economic circulation within this area. So it's a regional circulation interaction, especially with between the county urban center and then the small villages. And in the past years, there have been thousands of people moving back from cities to Songyang County. And most of these villagers returning home started their own small businesses or startups in different villages. And so the whole Songyang story was really a learning experience for us, understanding the tradition, the culture, history, production, and also rediscovering the, we'll call it the capacity, the strengths of architecture and design, which can really become a social instrument. So when we were invited by the neighbor Jingyun County, we started to look at this a typical local issue with these abandoned quarries as industrial heritage, which, you know, the quarry production in Jingyun County, which is different from Songyang, more with the agricultural production, but Jingyun with this rocky mountain, the quarry was the main production for income for people to make a living, and the quarry heritage can be traced back to 1,000 years ago. Around 2 decades ago, because of the ecological issues and safety issues, most of these small quarry operations were abandoned, were actually closed down by the government with new policy. So, and just similar to the agricultural tradition, the quarry production in this region were done by family workshops, so left along with over 3,000 of abandoned quarry caves. And again, architecture design is we actually make a proposal to the local county government by looking into a cluster of abandoned quarries, caves, and the proposal is that instead of making new buildings for this scenic district with, you know, village communities still living in this district, why don't we look at the abandoned quarries as existing architecture and space, and we can reuse these spaces and to convert them into public cultural spaces with programs. So on one hand, this would on one hand, this is providing a solution for the abandoned, you know, thousands of quarries. But on the other hand, to reuse these abandoned industrial heritage is also a way to restore the collective memory and heritage. So we were able to finish 3 quarry spaces. The design, the total amount of time for design and construction finish of 3 quarries were 10 months. And the building, the cost for these quarry spaces were much less than compared to making new buildings. So this is actually the way it becomes a positive way to look into these abandoned waste. And now there are other private investors coming to the region to see the potential of converting these abandoned spaces into somehow a new program, new public space, or for new businesses like restaurants. And then I want to introduce Fujian Tulo, which I think is the most beautiful architecture in the world. It's in my home province, Fujian province in South China. Tulou was built since 12th, 13th century, and it was originally built as a defense structure because this was really a trouble area. So the local people invented this typology, vernacular typology, first as a defense castle facility and also to accommodate collective living, sometimes for hundreds of people. But then there was 46 Tulou buildings were listed by UNESCO as World Cultural Heritage, but there's still thousands of Tulou buildings, and eventually, just because of the Tulous are losing, original functionalities for either defense or collective living, because people are with the economic development, local community, local villages are more into building their own single-family houses. So most of the Tulou buildings become vacant and eventually abandoned. So there was really after a visit to this region in 2020, in December, that we realized this Tulou isn't only about the World Cultural Heritage, the 46 Tulou buildings, but also it becomes a social architectural urgency in our view. So we made a proposal again to the local government saying that this situation has to be fixed. There's a problem. We have to acknowledge there's a problem with the Tulou, but it could be simply solved with design proposal. And we took 7 Tulou buildings in 3 counties together, working together with these three counties and also Zhangzhou City, and also with the adaptive reuse. And it's actually rather a social strategy. Instead of the very, the specific design, the articulation of the design, but we rather take it as a strategy. So the design solution for these 7 Tulou buildings can also apply to the thousands of abandoned Tulou relics. So the idea, first of all, is that we address that ruin as the new typology. So these heritage buildings, normally with the regulation for heritage building, you have to rebuild everything into the original condition, like with the traditional techniques. But then with all these ruins, we can argue that if the government doesn't have the enough funding for this situation, why don't we take the existing moment as the starting point? So we see ruin as a new typology. So it's only to repair the leftover building parts. But then the ruin, as it could become a lookout terrace, or it could also become new gardens or courtyards. So just in short, the ruin can become a new starting point, also the new opportunity to introduce the identity to each different Tulou buildings. So this actually, it's not a specific design language, but rather to take design as a social design process. And at the same time, the Tulou doesn't have the defense or a living function, but then they can easily be reused as a public space, as a community space. So by introducing a different program to each Tulou building according to the village heritage and context, this can really become, each Tulou is also it carries the collective memory. It's a community center and also the meeting point for the visitors to understand the culture, the heritage of this specific village. So now I'm going to start with the Major Island project. Actually, I think it's also a continuation of what we have been working, starting from the mountain region in general, this is a rural area and less developed area, and sometimes also forgotten area. So we wanted to see that this is with the working process that we started to see the potential, the capacity of design and architecture can really help to revive or to address to the social urgencies in different regions. But at the same time, every region has its own identity and also its own specific issues. So this actually engages a process for architects to research, to analyze, to diagnose what the symptoms are, and then to provide a solution, design solution as the remedy. And it's the same thing with the major island. So this is the major island is mostly known as the home island of Mazu, the goddess. This is iconic building on the island at the north part of the island, the Mazu Temple, which receives 3 million visitors every year for pilgrimage. And Mazu is a young lady who sacrificed her life for the good virtue to save people in the beginning of the Song Dynasty over 1,000 years ago. And since then, she has become a legendary figure as also for the global Chinese society. So Mazu is, the name of Macau comes from Mazu. Macau literally means Mazu Temple. This is the statue on the island, and also the temples on the island and the north part of the island, and pilgrimage running, almost like every season. But that it's the different scale of pilgrimage. Actually, if you're on the island, you could probably encounter the pilgrimage every day. It could be from the temple, from the major festivals, major holiday, major memorial days, or from a temple coming from another country, from Philippines, from Indonesia, returning home to this major island. So it's really the most overwhelming program on this small island. But if you look at the island, it's also a very compact island for 40,000 inhabitants, which also has a very dense fabric, living fabric with with 11 villages, and also the one middle school and several elementary schools. So it's a living island with people really living on this small island with a history of over 1,000 years. And with visitors coming to this island, mostly they would come to arrive at the Mazu Temple, of course. And some people would also go to this Golden Beach as tourists in the summer, in the good weather days. And most, they might arrive, also visit to this national reserve park at the south end of this island. But that was it. This pretty much was the destination. So with this situation, the local island community and also the local administrations, they were hoping that there would be new interventions or to attract people, visitors, 3 million visitors, to visit the other sides of the island, like the other villages. So and the villagers were also hoping that to welcome, to receive more visitors as a way to improve their income and revenue. So the initial invitation for us was actually to make a central iconic museum at the center of the island, which we always understand this is quite common strategy happening in the cities. It's like the Bilbao effect, and then you have iconic architecture attracting visitors with, you understand the kind of the architecture. But then after visiting this island, we made a different proposal. We were really running through the island, which is only, if you go over the island, it only takes half an hour by driving. But then if you get to visit, different villages and also to understand the environment, and also the production, the tradition on the island, you would discover this rich culture heritage, production heritage, and very unique production with the marine ecology, with the aquaculture, and how people living on a small island, which this is island without any natural river, how they make a living, how they make a survival on this small island, which was really fascinating for us to understand. Things go with the tradition, with the ancient tradition, but also with the modern program, modern production. The project really opened up a new territory for knowledge, learning for us. And I'm still overwhelmed whenever I talk about how this different kind of culture. But anyway, we selected 6 locations. Instead of making one building museum, we selected 6 locations along this small island and wanted to introduce every location becomes a representation of a specific production heritage. But these, breaking one museum into 6 locations is also a way to formulate a loop along this island, but also to introduce the visitors to meet with the villager, different village communities. And these different locations can also become the community center programs for local villages. So for the, and you have seen the movie. I hope you have also seen some of the drawings to understand what we are doing here. And I mean, maybe very often you would say it's very confusing to understand whether this is architecture. But for us, it was also a struggle, quite a challenge for us to realize that. For me to understand whether this is a making architecture. For example, like we discovered this on offshore production. First of all, this kelp production is a tradition on this island, but since 20 years ago, there's also new cultivation by the local fishermen with this floating bamboo structure, cultivating oyster, cultivating the abalone with in these boxes underneath the deep ocean water on the east side of the island. And these are very simple structure made by bamboo and empty bottles underneath. So for the floating and also this floating bamboo structure on the ocean water becomes a stable platform. Was very fascinating. You've seen the movie that how we can really walk on top of this floating structure. And when you're on the island, when you're on this structure, you don't realize it's probably 10 meters ocean water underneath. It felt like, for me, it felt like walking along a swimming pool. It's very, very fascinating structure for me as an architect, because normally we build on the land. We don't really consider water as the ground to build. but also what's underneath the ground, underneath the water, was also very fascinating, intriguing. I mean, still something that I would consider, how we can, as an architect, how is a potential that we can look into the water, the space underneath the water. But anyway, there's no answer for that. And then we also discovered that there's this cultivation, aquaculture for fish on with the ocean water, which we tried to walk along this circular structure, and it was very dangerous, especially on the day that we arrived with a strong wind. It was almost like impossible to walk along this circular structure. You see that on the film that we had to, because the director asked, you have to walk around. But otherwise, I wouldn't recommend as a destination. So we realized that, and also just by research on internet, we found also the article, like research about co-cultivation of kelp, oyster, and fish can help up to clean up the water, because some of the aqua cultivation with the fish can really create the pollution. But the co-cultivation system with kelp and fish can clean the water, the ocean water. So that becomes the initial, the starting point that we realize maybe we can look into, the very stable floating bamboo structure together with this circular fish cultivation, like the artificial fish pond in the ocean. And we can work on these systems together, and then to have the different cultivation integrated in one structure to, first of all, it could stabilize this structure with both cultivation, and it also helps to clean the water for the cultivation. And this is also an island that we receive a lot of university students from the adjacent cities, like the Huachao University from Quanzhou University, which is just 1 hour away. And the students would arrive on the island for their research on, especially on the marine ecology, like the mangrove or cultivation or this aqua cultivation, marine cultivation. So in the end, it's a structure floating on the ocean and really become a platform to integrate the kelp cultivation, fish cultivation, alboni cultivation, and also to provide a platform for visitors, not for tourists, but mostly for the young researchers to understand this co-cultivation system. And it comes with a simple structure, really, it's a design really based on top of existing cultivation structure, and then to provide a space on the ocean. So for this island, without any natural water, natural river, any reuse or renewal of the any fresh water, wastewater becomes valuable, which we don't normally realize that wastewater is a valuable, precious resource if you're living on continent. But living on a small island like this, even the wastewater become a precious resource. And so even since the ancient time, this is location of this water plant facility. And by this map, it's showing, you can see the circular forms. We have, even with this fabric, we also already have 4 small circular ponds in this part of the village. This is the traditional way how local fishermen collect rainwater, and also to filter the wastewater by watergrass, by plants, by watergrass like lotus. So this is also a ancient knowledge, local indigenous technique knowledge that we found it a new, starting point that maybe to take this this technique, this water treatment, filtration technique, that we are able to revive a abandoned vegetable farm. This is one of the two only vegetable farms on the island. So the idea is that we were able to build a new water filtration system, but with much more sophisticated systems. So the water coming out of this natural filtration system is able to be the grade A water. So the quality of this water is not only normally the filtered water is only for the irrigation of the trees, but now we can, with this much more sophisticated system, this can become the irrigation water for the vegetable, for food. So we have to calculate the amount of daily need, or of course in the normal days, not like the rainy days, for the water, the amount of water, and then also to provide a new filter pond, and with the terrace system, the wastewater will go through these different terraces by gravity and then stored at the center of this pond. So then, based on this plant, this water infrastructure plant, a building is only as the extension of this infrastructure. And this is the whole water filtration pond, and also with the extended space for as a learning educational facility, but also as a leisure, a pavilion for the farmers. And then the adjacent land is how we're going to revive the vegetable farm. So this actually not only the building or the infrastructure, but the entire project of including the vegetable farm becomes it's to revive this abandoned vegetable farm plantation. But also this can become an educational platform for the local school students to understand how, the value of water and the value of the potential of filtering this wastewater. So in a sense, this process isn't to make, to build a building on the first hand, but rather the building is rather as the extension, as the supporting program for this facility, for this cultivation. So here we use the timber, COT timber structure based on top of the existing, the water filtration infrastructure plant, and to provide a pavilion, leisure space, and also indoor educational programs. And we also want to take the opportunity to look at the agriculture. This vegetable plantation actually can also become a space with the melon shed. Especially, in the summer days, it could become a sheltering from the sun. So, and then this is also a research to look into the permaculture system, which is a very traditional local Chinese agricultural system. And then we started to introduce this bamboo structure for melon sheds for the melon vegetable plantation. And we hope that the space underneath these melon sheds can be integrated in the future when the building is finished. It's a system of space for the local school students as a learning field, as a classroom in the nature. So we already started with the plantation of the vegetable and melons. So we'll see, maybe in a few months, this will grow. So working on this island, it was also the first time for myself to really to discover, to learn about this mangrove system. I mean, I only heard about mangrove before, but never really looked specifically into what mangrove is and what it's really doing. And so we were really lucky to discover this mangrove plantation on the west part of the island. So we've been looking into the east part of the island, which is deep ocean water, and then now we're arriving at the west side of the island facing the continent, and where you have this mudland. And also this is the area that you have high tide every 6 hours and low tides every 6 hours. It's almost like the so with the high tide, the mudland would be covered by ocean water, of course, but and with the low tide, you will see this land really appears. It's like I think it's similar to the Mount Saint-Michel in France, in South France, where you have the tides, the shifting of tides during the day. And it was also very fascinating to see already there's a plantation of mangrove along the west coastal line for the restoration, ecological restoration in this region. In the ancient time, the local fishermen would use the mudland for their farming, cultivation, and also later on eventually started to build a fish pond and destroy the mangrove, the local natural wild mangrove forest. So since I would say 1-2 decades ago, with the new ecological law policy, many of the coastal lines or coastal cities in China started to rebuild or plant these mangrove forests along the coastal area. And actually mangrove is it's an intelligent ecosystem. It's not just a forest, it's an intelligent ecosystem that helps to restore the ecology, but also to provide a shelter space for biodiversity along the coastal line. And it's really for the species on the mudland. So on this picture, actually, this is also the mangrove plantation. You see these mangrove trees, they're not very tall at all, probably like 1.5 meters, but they have been growing for over 15 years. So in this region, the mangrove, it's actually very difficult to preserve. So there's a lot of efforts after the plantation to preserve these mangrove forests along this mudland. And every month there will be visitors, actually young researchers coming from the adjacent universities to take this as their research base. And you would also see this rectangular building on this abandoned structure. So in the beginning, our proposal was actually more about reusing these abandoned buildings on the land as a facility for young researchers, or for visitors. But then after we've done with all the drawings, or even the city drawings, we were told by client, the local administration, that they still have issues with the ownership, and it's impossible to build this thing to solve this issue. It was quite frustrating at that moment, after you're done with every design, every drawings, and it's ready to go for construction, and then you were told something was never, there's some complications with this project, this proposal. So we went back to this site again. And the reason for us to propose a research base here was actually by the mangrove system here, and also to look into, this is a very fascinating site where you understand high tide and low tide. you see that when the high tide comes, all the mangrove will be really underwater, but then when the low tide, by the low tide, everything will merge and appear. And then you also see this rectangle that is very large scale. It was a fish pond to cultivate crabs and clams, and it was closed down because of the fish pond. Basically, it could generate the pollution with the cultivation. So it was closed down and have been abandoned for 2 decades. So we started to really look at the place, and then we try to understand, what is the most valuable part of this site. Maybe it's not about the building on the land, because when you make a building on the land, it's for people, right? It's for the researchers, for the students, for visitors. But maybe this is only this. What's beautiful or what's valuable about this location is how you see the rhythm, the pattern of the ocean, and also to understand the cultivation, the complication of cultivation of mangrove, the preservation of mangrove, and also the preservation of biodiversity on this site, on this location. So after talking with our mangrove scientists, who was also a professor from Tsinghua University, and also he happened to be from this island as well. So Professor Lin gave us a inspiration that the space, when you plant with the mangrove, the fish pond space can also become a shelter for the biodiversity. So this really gives a kind of a very overwhelming moment, even though we made a proposal that this project, this location becomes only to restore the abandoned and also the fish pond, which was also already fallen apart. But the idea is that, first of all, is to, with already, you see the mangrove plantation within this fish pond. So restoring this fish pond can grow together, while actually also together with the mangrove to provide a shelter for different species on this mudland, like a clam, fish, crabs, and birds. And also becomes a research base for students visiting this location, not only to look into the growing situation of the mangrove, but also to take this fish pond as a research space for biodiversity. So it's very minimal design that you probably see this trace of steps, like very minimal hint for potential walkways for students, for our young researchers. But the overall idea is that this becomes a space for other species on the mudland. So that really gives, even though what you see here is like very, almost like invisible design intervention, but for us it was really a very overwhelming moment to understand, as an architect, you make buildings, we always say they're human-centered, but very often becomes human only. And this is a proposal that we think about, providing a space for other species. So this is how it goes with the high tide and also low tide. And we consider, just by standing on the land and looking into this mudland, observing the nature shifts, changing by time, and also to understand the mangrove system and then the biodiversity, it becomes a educational space. So it's not a, well, it could be a sightseeing. It's also beautiful, but it's more important to reveal this knowledge and of ocean ecology, of marine ecology to visitors. And as we walk along this island, the coastal line, we were led by the fishermen to visit their seaweed incubator and seaweed plantation. So this is the seaweed plantation or seaweed culture structure on the mudland. But before that, actually, this is really a beautiful ocean marine culture scene on this island, on the west side of the island. But actually, before the seaweed was shipped to this beautiful bamboo structure on the mudland, they were first incubated inside the building, which we call a baby seaweed incubator. I don't know if it's the right term, but we found it very adorable. You would see, I mean, this was the fisherman who took us to this building structure. We found it was really, really incredibly beautiful. This is a silent space. But do you understand, the seed of seaweed is cultivating along the shell of oyster and really soaked underneath inside the ocean water for 8 months before they were transported to the mudland bamboo structure. So anyway, this is a lot of knowledge that is not about architecture, about making of a building, but it was really a journey for us to try to understand how the life and production goes with, and this is also a very specific local indigenous knowledge. So we took this as the opportunity, as a starting point to introduce a building to incorporate, to integrate production and also for our social cultural program and leisure programs. So this becomes a building that taking the production, the seaweed incubator as the center of the building, and then with other educational leisure programs looking out on the side, looking out to the ocean. So that's the center of the building as a production space, and also with the classrooms or cafe looking facing the ocean. And it's on construction, and this is how we testify the local stone, and also working together with the oyster shell. I want to specifically introduce this mudland. Again, we're going back to the mudland. It's another cultivation, oyster cultivation, local oyster cultivation on the mudland, just by very simple structure. The masonry sticks really pull down to the mudland, so it could collect the oyster coming with the high tide and low tide. So every day when the low tide comes, the fishermen were able to arrive on this mudland to collect oyster gathering along these masonry stone sticks. And we wanted to take this as an opportunity. There's already an existing road coming in, so we just wanted to introduce a trail, a circular walkway along this ocean farm. So that's the indication, the drawing of this trail, new trail, and with the stone masonry base, and also with the oyster shell as the construction material that can really introduce people to walking. And then we also take the fish cage as indication of the walkway as well. So with this project is that we try to understand, this is, high tide and low tide on this mudland, and already the existing walkway that fishermen can drive their motor motor cars to collect the oyster and to to bring them over to the market. So this is actually we found it was really fascinating. It becomes almost like architecture, becomes a space that's created by nature itself. When we talk about architecture building, it's always about the accessibility. So you enter a space or you are out in the nature. But here it's already a space that's created by the nature itself. So with the right low tide, every day there's probably 1 or 2 hours, you are able to walk on this mudland, and that's it. So then this is actually, we tried that with this indication of the walkway, we are bringing people, visitors, to go deep into the ocean, deep into on the mudland, and deep into the ocean farm for oyster cultivation. And we see this also as an educational learning platform, but with, again, minimal interventions. And we wanted to argue that this is architecture created by nature itself, by ocean. And then at the end of our journey, coming back to the north part of, next to the temple, we have the harbor that is arrival points for all the fishing boats coming back. And they will moor their ships after, the fishing in the ocean and arrive home. And also this is the passage to look up to the mountain to see, as with the Mazu temple and the statue of Mazu. So we see this as, arrival or returning point, arriving home for these fishermen, and they will collect whatever they have received and arrive home for their also the culture, the tradition, performance. And so this is a plaza as the first arrival point for these fishermen returning home. And the design is actually just to look into a very simple pavilion, taking the form of the layering of roofs of the temple, Mazu temple, and creating a space really on top of the cliff. So we don't see that our design is a complete building, but it's rather just a layer of roof. But then we take the space with the cliff. That's an architecture, that's existing space. So by introducing, and this is a cliff also, with the high tide and low tide, again, everything is affected by the tide on this island, along this island. So there's already an existing space, and then we can bring people to the waterfront, with the low tide. But then the roof is actually integrating with the cliff, and that becomes, the integration becomes architecture. So I think this is for today. We are probably right in time for the talk. I only wanted to say thank you. Thank you.